Todd Mallister had seen a lot in his recon career: plasma storms, shape-shifting enemies, gravity collapses. But nothing prepared him for his new partner's tail, brushing his leg every 5 minutes. He tried not to glance at her again, but it was impossible. The cockpit of the scout ship wasn't designed for comfort. 2 seats, barely enough legroom, and every inch of space packed with sensors and holodisplays. And in the pilot's chair sat Adra.Vulpini. She moved with a fluid grace that made even operating a control console look like a dance. Her fur was subtle, more of a velvet sheen across her skin and a full coat catching the light with faint copper hues beneath her crimson hair. Large fox-like ears twitched constantly, swiveling toward the faint hum of the engines, the distant ping of sensors, even the sound of Todd adjusting his jacket. Her amber eyes flicked across the displays with laser precision. And then, of course, there was the tail, a long, thick plume of russet fur that had a mind of its own, swaying lazily before curling back against her chair, only to brush against his knee every time turbulence shifted the ship. "You're staring again, human." Todd blinked, caught mid-thought. "Am not," he lied. Adra didn't even turn her head. Her ears angled backward slightly, the Vulpini equivalent of a smirk. "You are. It's fine. I know my species fascinates you. You all think we're exotic." Todd coughed into his fist, trying to play it cool. "I was just making sure you weren't falling asleep at the controls." "Sleep?" She finally looked at him, one brow arching sharply. "On duty? You really don't know us at all." He grinned, because banter was safer than silence. "Guess that's why they paired us up. I'm here to teach you how to lighten up." She tilted her head, ears flicking once. "And I'm here to keep you alive." Todd chuckled, but her tone was pure steel. The Vulpini didn't bluff. The sensors chimed before he could reply. Adra leaned forward, tail stiffening as she scanned the readings. Energy spike, third moon, matching smuggler profiles. Todd studied the display. "That's our jackpot, then. Any defenses?" "Nothing we can't handle," she said, adjusting their trajectory with swift, economical movements. The landing that followed was so smooth Todd barely felt it. She powered down the engines and rose in one fluid motion, already gathering gear. "We go on foot. Quiet." Outside, the world stretched in alien beauty, purple-hued rock spires twisting like frozen flames, pale vegetation glowing faintly under a sky streaked with green clouds. The air was thin, sharp. Todd checked his sidearm while Adra scanned the horizon, her ears flicking as if tasting the wind. They moved fast, her steps silent, his careful. Hours passed in tense quiet, broken only by her low warnings: unstable ground here, poisonous flora there. Todd found himself impressed despite everything. She didn't just move through the terrain. She owned it. "Convoy," she hissed suddenly, ears flattening. Before he could react, her hand gripped his arm, dragging him toward a narrow fissure between towering rocks. They squeezed in close, bodies pressed together in the tight space as the low rumble of grav vehicles vibrated through the ground. Todd's heart thudded. Not from fear, from her, the heat of her body. The brush of her tail curling instinctively around his leg, holding him close. He caught her scent, a wild, electric tongue that made his pulse spike. Through the slit of rock, they watched shadows glide past, armored transports, unmarked and deadly. Smugglers, all right. When the last engine hum faded, neither of them moved. The silence stretched, thick and electric. Todd dared a glance at her. Her amber eyes burned in the gloom, inches from his own, unblinking, intense. He felt her breath on his cheek, warm and quick. "Close," he murmured, trying for humor, but his voice came out rough. Her lips curved in a slow, knowing smile. too close for your comfort, human?" "Not even a little," he whispered back, "for a heartbeat." Neither looked away. And something shifted silent, undeniable. The smugglers weren't the only dangerous thing on this moon. Asterisk, the first warning came as a vibration beneath their boots. Faint, but growing. Todd felt it through the rock before he heard the distant crackle in the sky. Adra stiffened instantly, her ears snapping upright, swiveling in a dozen micro-movements like living radar. "Storm," she muttered, voice tight. "A big one." Todd frowned, glancing upward. The horizon shimmered with strange green fire where the clouds had begun to churn. "We knew about ion storms," he said, watching the sky boil faster than he liked. "This looks worse." Adra was already moving, pulling a small scanner from her belt. It flickered once, then died in her hands with a sad electronic chirp. Her tail lashed once, betraying tension. "Electromagnetic surge. Too strong. We have minutes, maybe less, before the field spikes." Todd didn't need to ask what that meant. He could feel the static rising already, prickling over his skin like invisible claws. His HUD flickered with static snow. "Back to the ship?" "Too far," Adra snapped. She was scanning the rocks with quick, darting glances, her nostrils flaring. "We need minerals shielding dense stone." "There." Todd followed her gaze to a jagged opening halfway down a slope of purple rock. The cave didn't look like much. Dark, narrow, but it was either that or cook alive when the storm hit. They ran. Or rather, Adra ran and Todd scrambled after her, because even in a crisis she moved with that eerie Volpini grace, bounding over slick stone like her legs had springs. He was panting by the time they reached the cave mouth, and the sky behind them had gone from green to a sickly violet, alive with veins of pulsing light. The first thunderclap hit like a railgun, making the ground quake. Inside the cave was barely an alcove, tight walls closing around them, the air cool and still, the ceiling low enough that Todd had to duck. He followed Adra deeper until the outside glow became a dim memory, and the roar of the storm was muted to a low, vibrating growl. His breath came hard, fogging in the cool air. "Safe," Adra murmured after a moment, pressing her palm against the stone. Her furred ears flicked, as if listening to something only she could hear. "Minerals here should block most of the interference. But our gear," she glanced down at her fried scatter. "Dead." Todd tried his come out of habit. Nothing but static. He sank against the wall with a sigh. Great, no ship, no comms, and a death storm outside. I'm guessing this wasn't. In the mission briefing, Adra didn't answer right away. She had unshouldered her pack, kneeling with that uncanny stillness that made her look carved from living flame. Finally, she said, "The storm will last until the energy cycle collapses. Hours. Maybe days." Todd's jaw slackened. "Days? In this little hole?" Her golden eyes slid to him, unblinking. "You sound worried, human." "I sound claustrophobic," he muttered, then added with a lopsided grin. "Unless you're planning to dig us a guest suite in here." She didn't smile. Vulpini rarely did. But something softened in her gaze, just a flicker, quick as lightning outside. Then she said, "Your species doesn't regulate temperature well, does it?" Todd blinked. "UA. I mean, we're fine if it's not freezing or on fire. Why?" "Because your body is already cooling," she said matter-of-factly. "I can smell it." He stared. "You can? Smell that?" "Among other things." The way her ears angled forward when she said it made his pulse skip. She moved closer before he could recover, her voice calm, practical, except for the heat in those amber eyes. "The simplest solution is shared warmth. It's efficient." Todd swallowed hard. His throat suddenly felt dry as the cave dust. "Efficient, right." Then her tail brushed his leg, deliberate this time. The softness of it made his breath catch, even as she lowered herself beside him with the same liquid grace she did everything. Her shoulder pressed against his. Warm, solid, alive. Relax, she murmured, as if reading his thoughts. I'm not going to bite you. Good to know, he said hoarsely. Then, because humor was his only lifeline, he added, unless you're into that sort of thing. Her ear twitched. And for the first time, Todd saw her smile, not the faint, razor-edged thing from before, but something small and real. It hit harder than the storm outside. Time blurred after that. They sat pressed together, the cave trembling with distant thunder, the glow of alien lightning painting faint streaks across the walls. At some point, his hand brushed hers. Not planned, just instinct. She didn't pull away. If anything, her fingers curled lightly around his warm, strong shore. She spoke again. Her voice was softer, almost strange. Todd, yeah? There's something you should know about Vulpini biology. Her eyes met his, molten gold catching the stormlight. Whatever she was about to say hung heavy in the air between them, an unspoken thing thrumming like a live wire. But before she could finish, a violent crack split the sky, making the cave shudder. Her hand gripped his hard, and for one charged heartbeat, they just stared at each other, breathing the same air, sharing the same heat, the storm. Outside, nothing compared to the one building here, Dot. And in that moment, Todd realized he wasn't afraid of the storm at all. Asterisk. Todd had fought pirates, insurgents, even a nest of carnivorous lizards. But nothing in the galaxy prepared him for a Vulpini, with mood swings and cravings. It started subtly. A few days after the storm, after the cave, after that night, Hadra was different. Not in a bad way, just sharper somehow. Her senses, always uncanny, were now almost supernatural. She could smell the faint charge of a power cell 3 decks away, hear a coolant leak through sealed bulkheads. And then there were the other changes, the ones Todd noticed more than he probably should have. She was warmer to the touch. Her pupils dilated when he came near, like some primal instinct had clicked into overdrive. Her tail, usually inelegant arc of control, had become unpredictable, swishing with restless energy, curling around his leg when she thought he wasn't paying attention. And those eyes stars, those eyes they'd always been molten amber, but now they glowed like a furnace even in low light. It wasn't just biology. Something was shifting between them, something deeper than proximity and circumstance. Todd was in the ship's galley when she walked in, barefoot, her movements as silent as ever. She scanned the shelves with a feral intensity that made his brows rise. Problem? He asked, leaning on the counter. Food, she said curtly, rifling through ration packs. Everything smells wrong. They smell the same as yesterday, he said with a grin. Unless my nose is broken. Her ears flicked in irritation, and she shot him a look sharp enough to slice titanium. Your nose is primitive. She pulled a pack free, tore it open, sniffed, and grimaced. Disgusting. A tail lashed once, a clear sign of agitation. Raised his hands. Okay, easy. I'll whip something up. Just don't eviscerate the protein packs. Her ears flattened. I am not irrational. Never said you were. He kept his tone light, even as something in his gut twisted. Something was off. He watched her pace like a caged predator, energy coiling under her skin. Not fear, not anger. Something else. When she finally settled sort of at the narrow galley table, her movements were slower, controlled again. Too controlled. Todd placed a steaming dish in front of her, the best approximation of meat stew he could manage from rations. Try it. If you hate it, you can bite me instead. Her lips curved barely before she tasted the food. One bite, then another. Then she exhaled. A low sound that made something in his chest clench. Satisfaction. Relief. Something else he didn't dare name. He slid into the seat opposite her. "Adra," he said quietly, "talk to me. You've been different since." The cave, her spoon stilled. For a long moment, silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the ship and the faint flick of her tail across the floor. Finally, she lifted her gaze to his, and the look in her eyes nearly stole his breath. "There is no protocol for this," she said softly. "For us." He leaned forward. "For what?" Another beat of silence. Then, with deliberate care, she set the spoon down, her fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. "Vulpiany biology is adaptive. When we truly bond, it triggers changes. Preparations." Todd's heart thudded like a drop pod hitting atmosphere. Preparations for what? Her nostrils flared in a sharp exhale, as if steadying herself for carrying a litter. For a second, her words didn't register. The hum of the engines roared in his ears, drowning out everything but the pounding in his chest. "Wait," he said, voice rough. "You mean?" "Yes, human." Her voice was a whisper now, but it cut through him like a blade. "I am with young. You're young." The chair scraped back before he realized he'd moved. He stood there, staring, his mind flipping through every conceivable reaction, and rejecting all of them except one, disbelief. "That's not possible," he said, though it sounded weak even to him. Her ears angled forward in challenge. "Vulpiany adapt. It is how we survive. If the bond is strong and the species compatible." Her gaze softened, molten and fierce. "All at once. One night is enough." Todd's knees threatened to give, so he sat again, dragging a hand through his hair. His voice cracked on a half laugh. "One night. Just one." He looked at her, really looked, and something inside him shifted, snapped, realigned into something terrifying and undeniable. "So, you're saying I'm going to be a father?" Her tail curled slowly around the leg of his chair, a gesture he'd learned to recognize as both possessive and intimate. "Not a father, Todd. A sire. A mate." Her head tilted, ears twitching as her voice dropped lower. "Among my people, this bond cannot be broken." He swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing into his bones. Mate for life. The thought should have scared him. Instead, it lit a spark in his chest he couldn't extinguish. "Guess we'd better start planning the nursery," he said finally, voice dry, heart hammering. Her smile small, sharp, devastating was answer enough. "You're telling me you're expecting puppies?" Commander TH's antennae quivered like they'd been struck by lightning. Todd Mallister stared at the floor of the debriefing chamber, praying for a sudden gravitational collapse to swallow him whole. "Not exactly puppies," he said slowly, glancing at Adra beside him. "I mean, technically they'll be hybrid." "Offspring," Adra interrupted, her voice cool and steady, though Todd could feel the tension radiating off her like heat waves. Her ears were upright, tail coiled around her legs like a velvet rope, every inch of her exuding control. Except for her fingers, they flexed and curled against the edge of the table, betraying nerves only Todd would notice. Commander TH sat back in his chair, all four antennae twitching like they had a mind of their own. The Andorian's pale eyes swept from Todd to Adra and back again. "This base has protocols," he said finally, his voice vibrating with restrained disbelief. "I'm fairly certain don't start an interspecies diplomatic incident is near the top." Todd forced a smile that felt like it had been welded onto his face. "It wasn't exactly in the mission plan either, sir." "Explain," TA said flatly. Todd opened his mouth, then shut it again. "Because where the hell did he even start?" "Well, Commander, we were trapped in a cave during an electromagnetic storm, and one thing led to another. Yeah, that would go over well. Adra spared. Him the agony. The storm forced us into close quarters, she said, her tone clipped. Professional, but her tail betrayed her, twitching once behind her chair. Physical proximity escalated into instinctive bonding. Among my species, this is a rare occurrence, but biologically significant. Significant, TH repeated, his antennae curling inward like claws. Try catastrophic. Do you realize what happens if this gets out? Vulpini elders will descend on this base like vultures. The Terran Council will lose its mind. Half the galaxy will want to study you, and the other half will want to use you as a political weapon. Todd rubbed the back of his neck. So? Not great news, then. They ignored him, turning back to Adra. You confirmed this with medical? Yes, she said simply. Dr. Prell has conducted scans. The embryos are viable. 4 developing life forms. Todd blinked. Wait, 4? As in 4 pups? Adra's golden eyes slid toward him, molten with something between amusement and challenge. Our genetics favor multiples. You should prepare, human. Todd made a strangled noise that might have been a laugh or a small, panicked death rattle. 4. Sure. Great. Why not make it 5 and start a sports team? Commander TH pinched the bridge of his nose, an oddly human gesture for someone with antennae. Listen carefully. This does not leave this room. Not yet? Understood? Adra inclined her head. Todd managed a jerky nod. Good, TH continued. You'll both remain confined to base. Effective immediately, you're off active duty. We'll craft a narrative that minimizes diplomatic fallout. In the meantime, Dr. Prell will monitor. The situation. Todd exhaled slowly, relief flooding him until Teach's gaze speared him like a disruptor bolt. And Mallister? Sir? Try to keep your reproductive instincts in check for the next 24 hours. I have enough problems without you. Fathering an entire platoon of fox hybrids. Todd flushed scarlet. Yes, sir. Dismissed. The door hissed shut behind them, and for the first time since stepping into that chamber, Todd could breathe. Sort of. He glanced at Adra as they walked down the corridor, her stride smooth and unhurried, ears twitching faintly at every sound. She looked calm. Too calm. You handled that well, he said finally. Because panic solves nothing, she replied. Then, after a pause, her tail flicked and curled lightly around his wrist, sending a shock of heat straight up his arm. Besides, we have more pressing matters. Like what? Like preparing for a litter. Todd stumbled over his own boots. Right, yeah, no big deal. Just me, becoming the galaxy's first interspecies dad. He laughed weakly. Totally normal Thursday. Adra stopped so abruptly, he nearly ran into her. She turned her gaze, locking onto his with a molten intensity that made his mouth go dry. Do not make light of this, Todd, she said softly. This is not an accident. It is a bond, a life bond. Among my people, such unions are sacred. Irrevocable? Something shifted in her tone, a depth he hadn't heard before, something fierce, possessive, unyielding. It sent a shiver crawling down his spine. Not fear, something darker, something he couldn't quite name. He swallowed hard. Sacred, he echoed. Right, so I'm not just a dad, I'm a mate. Her ears flicked once in acknowledgement. Yes, for life. And just like that, the reality hit him like a pulse cannon to the chest. No going back, no protocol to hide behind. Just the two of them, and 4 little someones who didn't exist yesterday, but had already rewritten the rest of his life. Exhaled slowly, feeling the weight settle and finding, to his own surprise, that it didn't crush him. It anchored him. He reached out, letting his fingers brush the back of her hand, tentative but sure. Guess we'd better make this work then. Her tail coiled tighter around his wrist, and for the first time since the storm, she smiled. slow, dangerous smile that made his pulse trip. "Oh," she murmured, voice like velvet steel. "We will." Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. Inside, everything was about to ignite. Elder Nie's eyes gleamed as she pressed her hands to Adra's abdomen. Her voice dropped to a reverent whisper that carried more weight than a battle order. "You've given us a miracle." The room froze. Todd stood stiff as a rifle barrel, watching the most powerful Vulpini elder in 3 systems kneel in front of his mate. The term still made his brain stutter, but after the last 24 hours, in the commander's not-so-subtle lecture, there was no denying it. This wasn't a fling. This was forever. Behind Elder Nea, 2 Vulpini attendants lowered their hoods, golden eyes glowing in the chamber's dim light. Their tails twitched in unison, betraying excitement that their faces didn't show. They smelled of incense and frost sharp and wild, like a forest in winter. The blessing hall itself was a riot of alien beauty, sweeping arches of polished obsidian, soft bioluminescent vines pulsing with color along the walls, and a long mosaic floor depicting Vulpini legends Todd couldn't even begin to interpret. "This is formal," he muttered, tugging at the ceremonial jacket someone had shoved onto him. It was heavy, all black with silver threading, and tight enough that he wondered if it doubled as a compression harness. Adra stood tall at the chamber's center, radiant and unshakable, though Todd caught the faint ripple in her tail, a nervous flick she probably thought he wouldn't notice. Her crimson hair fell like fire down her back, contrasting against the pale shimmer of her skin. When her gaze met his across the circle, something inside him stilled. Her eyes burned like molten amber, and he understood, in that heartbeat, that whatever the ceremony meant to her people, it was life itself to her. Elder Nea rose slowly, turning her gaze on him. He'd stared down pirates, mercenaries, and a Zyran warlord who'd eaten half his enemies alive. None of them had made him sweat like this dignified predator in flowing silver robes. "Human," she said, and the word rolled like thunder in her low, melodic tone. "Do you understand the weight of this bond?" Todd's mouth went dry. "I think so?" Her ears angled forward, sharp and assessing. "Think is not enough. Among my kind, mating is not a fleeting urge. It is oath. It is blood and breath, carried beyond death. Do you claim this female as your life's equal, your heart's axis, your eternal mate?" The words hit like a graviton spike. Oath. Eternal. No take-backs in this culture. He glanced at Adra again, at the subtle tension in her jaw, the way her hands curled slightly at her sides like she was bracing for him to hesitate. And just like that, the choice stopped being a choice. "I do," he said, voice steady, even as his pulse rioted. "I claim her, for as long as I breathe and after, if that's part of the deal." Something flickered in Adra's eyes, then a crack in her composure, swift and bright as lightning. Her tail uncoiled, sliding across the floor like a living ribbon until it brushed his boot. Elder Nea nodded once, solemn. "Ben, it is sealed." She lifted her hands, murmuring in a language that sounded like wind through iron trees. The attendants joined in, their voices weaving a low, harmonic hum that made Todd's skin prickle. The chamber lights dimmed until the bioluminescent vines flared brighter, casting the scene in soft emerald and gold. Adra stepped forward, closing the space between them. When her fingers touched his, Todd felt something pulse through her skin, through the floor, through the very air. It wasn't imagination. The vines responded, flaring in brilliant streaks as the chant crescendoed. "The bond is recognized," Elder Nea intoned, her voice echoing in the chamber. "And the future secured." The hum faded, the light softened. And just like that, the galaxy tilted. Todd exhaled slowly, still gripping Adra's hands. So, that's it? We're official? More than official, Adra murmured, her voice low and edged with something primal. We are one. Our blood sings the same song now. Her tail slid around his waist, a gesture so intimate it made his throat tighten. No force in the void can break it. He swallowed hard, leaning in just enough to whisper back, Good thing I'm not planning to run. Elder Nea's gaze lingered on them, sharp and unreadable, before she spoke again. There will be interest, curiosity, even opposition. But know this. Her voice hardened like tempered steel. Any who seek to harm what you carry will answer to the Vulpini. These young are not anomaly. They are prophecy. Todd blinked. Prophecy? Nia's golden eyes glimmered with something ancient. A union foretold. Blood of instinct joined with blood of fire. Children born under twin moons, to bind what was broken. She tilted her head slightly. Perhaps your people call it destiny. Todd stared at her, then at Adra, then back at the glowing vines. His throat worked. No pressure then. The elder's smile was all teeth. Oh, human. Pressure is what makes stars burn. As the attendants began their final rites, Todd felt Adra press closer, her hand sliding into his. For all the weight of ceremony, all the eyes watching, there was only her, the steady strength in her grip, the warmth of her skin, the wild pulse in her veins that now matched his own. Whatever came next, politics, science teams, chaos, they'd face it together. And for the first time since this whirlwind began, Todd didn't feel overwhelmed. He felt ready. Almost got, because as they turned to leave, Elder Nia's voice followed them, cool and casual, like she'd just remembered something. Oh, and Malister? Todd glanced back. Yeah? Dr. Prell's last scan? Her ears twitched, and her smile deepened. You should prepare. There aren't 4. Todd's stomach plummeted. What? 5, she said simply. 5 heartbeats. The floor didn't swallow him. But he sure wished it would. Todd had expected chaos. He hadn't expected to be pacing a medical bay while ancient Vulpini midwives debated the merits of meat broth. The sterile human tech of the med suite clashed with the primal energy of the gathered Vulpini elders. Bioluminescent glyphs pulsed on the walls, glowing softly in harmony with the chanting that filled the air. The smell of antiseptic mingled with a musky, wild scent that made Todd's instincts hum. On the bed, if you could even call it that, Adra reclined against a mound of woven thermal blankets, her tail coiled protectively around her belly. She looked both ethereal and terrifying, her crimson hair damp with sweat, her golden eyes molten with fierce determination. How are you feeling? Todd asked for the 12th time in 10 minutes, his voice hoarse. Like I'm about to bring 5 beings into existence while you vibrate holes in the floor, she rasped, ears flattening briefly. Despite the edge in her voice, there was a glint of humor buried in those eyes. Todd stopped pacing, rubbing the back of his neck. Right, sorry, just 5, Adra, 5. He held up his hands, fingers spread wide, as if she needed the visual. Her lips twitched. You keep saying the number like it might shrink if you repeat it enough. Doesn't hurt to hope, he muttered, then crossed to her side, dropping to one knee. His fingers brushed hers, and he flinched at the heat radiating from her skin. You're burning up. It's normal, said Dr. Prell from behind a bank of scanners, his antennae twitching as he adjusted the readouts. Vulpini labor triggers a thermoregulatory surge to accelerate tissue adaptation. English, Doc, Todd growled. It means she's fine, the Andorian said dryly, without looking up. You, however, are another matter. Sit before you. Pass out. Todd ignored him. He was too focused on Adra, on the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the flecks of her claws against the blanket, the guttural sound rumbling low in her throat. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was something primal, something that made every hair on his body stand on end. "Breathe with me," he murmured, wrapping his hand around hers. In and out, slow. Her ears twitched. "You're trying to calm me?" she panted, baring her teeth in something that might have been a grin. "Brave or foolish?" "Both," he admitted, because humor was the only thing keeping his brain from short-circuiting. The first contraction hit like a plasma. Cannon. Adra's head tipped back, a low growl ripping from her throat as the glyphs on the walls flared bright green. Todd nearly leapt out of his skin. What the hell was that? "Energy resonance," Elder Nye intoned calmly, as if this were the most natural thing in the galaxy. "The young are strong." Todd's stomach flipped. Define strong. Before anyone could answer, another contraction rolled through Adra, and her claws shredded a section of blanket like paper. She bared her teeth at him, pupils blown wide, wild light in her gaze. She snarled. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered fiercely, tightening his grip on her hand. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The chanting rose, mingling with the hum of medical instruments. Sweat slicked Todd's brow as he murmured encouragement he wasn't sure she even heard. And then, after what felt like a war fought in silence, the first cry split the air. High-pitched, alive. Todd froze. His brain stuttered. Was that? "Yes," Prell barked. "One viable hybrid neonate, male." Todd's vision blurred. He didn't even realize he was crying until Adra reached weakly to brush his cheek with trembling fingers. "Look," she rasped, and the elder lifted a small, squirming bundle swathed in silver cloth. Tiny ears twitched. A wisp of red fur crowned a head that was so heartbreakingly small, and yet so perfect. The second came minutes later. Then the third. Then the fourth. Todd's heart couldn't keep up. Each time, the world tilted, his universe doubling, tripling, multiplying until he could barely breathe. And then Prell's voice cut through. "The haze. Last one?" Todd gripped Adra's hand like a lifeline. Her teeth clenched, her tail lashed, and with a final, guttural cry that shook the walls, it was over. 5.5 tiny lives nestled in a thermal cradle, their fur glistening. Under soft lights, tails curling instinctively toward each other. Two with his eyes. One with her ears so large they flopped forward like velvet leaves. One with a shock of midnight black fur. The last, smallest, quietest, stared at him with molten gold eyes that mirrored their mother's. Todd couldn't speak, couldn't move. He sank to the floor beside Adra, burying his face in her hair as laughter and tears shook his chest all at once. "We did it," he whispered hoarsely. "We did," she murmured, exhausted but radiant, her tail sliding weakly around his waist even now. "You should prepare, human." Her voice was a soft rumble against his neck, edged with wicked humor even through her fatigue. "They'll be running before you can walk straight again." Todd laughed, choked and raw, and kissed her forehead with a reverence that surprised. "Even him? Bring it on," he whispered. "All of it." Around them, the elders chanted blessings. The glyphs pulsed like living stars. And as Todd stared at the 5 impossibly small lives they had created, something vast and fierce unfurled inside him. A love so bright it burned through fear, through doubt, through everything. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a human. He was a mate, a father, a piece of something that would change 2 worlds forever. And for the first time in his life, Todd Mallister felt infinite. The end.